So from the chart I showed this morning about the highs, 620 was certainly important. As we pushed up into and above pivot on NQ after this balance, we were seeing ES struggling to get above pivot itself. And so anytime we push up into this zone of the 606 to 608 into the liquidity zone, we're going to see that dominator flash in, and we'll see the pull stack flip. Absorbing activity, and that can be seen on the leg to leg delta profile right here. Nothing notable at that point. 158, 141. I'll speed this up just a little bit. And what we can see is all this selling down here at the 98s provides a temporary support between that and pivot. So we get a negative 200, so forth. We get a little bit of covering into that. Drops it down, 163. ES is still underneath pivot, fighting around the weekly open. Then as we push up, what we're going to see is a lot of bid activity come in. You'll see it across the tape. Full stack takes it in, and the leg to leg delta winds up growing. It's 903 central. 200, 230 lots here. 100 some odd lots, 247. This fight back and forth in this mix. Now 300 lots. So between these two zones here, we've got over 500 lots that are long. Marketing in, getting long. Nothing to do yet. We're approaching a liquidity zone. Test up into the low portion of that. ES is still underneath pivot. NQ is trying to accelerate above pivot. We see the dominator flash in, and we start to see this absorption coming in, 90 some lots here. We have 200, 240, 124. We want to see a response. So we see the dominator coming in, these orders going back and forth, but ultimately absorbing up in this zone. We can see the pull stack flip, holding and maintaining here, stepping down towards pivot, and then backing off against the 98 to 94 zone. And as we push up, you see refreshing of orders in this mix, where the leg to leg delta is going to also show you that absorption is taking place. So these 255s right here down to 98s, little overzealous sellers potentially leading into this balance. If I'm seeing this move out with 178s, 194, 124, I don't want to see 200 lots short in this mix. But we push back up. We got 218 right here, and I want to see this grow. 307, 237 right here, showing absorption against those highs. So when this pull stack flips on the right here, right now, this area is a zone to engage short, especially being that ES tag pivot and is starting to reject pivot. We're still in a small balance, but you'll see the refreshing of orders in this zone. And we leave all of these buyers up and away. The attempt to absorb at pivot is evident. You can see that negative delta. However, no progress is being made up here. Dominator and delta map exhaustion, ES is below pivot, and we begin to accelerate from that. That's fine. And if you're not quick enough to dive into this or were uncertain, that's okay. Allow it to show its hand. We begin to see acceleration out of this zone. Underneath pivot, coming into the 70s. ES doing the same underneath pivot. And then potential for reoffer is obviously back in this area. Now at pivot, that attempt to absorb here is now part of that acceleration from the 94s. So you push up into this zone, leading a small balance. We know that there was a participant in this area of the 600s. So when it comes back in, we need to utilize ES Canary, where we at against pivot, and also gauge what's occurring as far as the orders coming through the tape. It can also be easily reflected on the leg-to-leg profile. So up here, we have the 217 buy-in balance, 189, 247, 145. So in this vicinity here, we see further buy-in balance, we see further in absorption. ES is still below pivot. Want to retest, want to see it grow. The buy imbalance, I mean. Yes, still below pivot. We're retesting pivot here, and we're getting a lot of negative delta. If I'm looking to sell pivot, I don't want to see negative delta, especially in 300s. That can lead to a little bit of a pop. So some of these positions are exited. You see that by the 292s, and I want to see this come up into this mix here where we sell the seller initially. And a second potential for reentry is when we see the absorption in the zone up in this mix. I want to see the 217s, the 189s, all of this. I want to see it grow. And I don't want to see it be negative delta. I want to see it be positive delta, but not making progress. We get up to that zone, then I want to gauge. If I'm gauging for an offer, I want to watch the bid on the DOM. Watching the DOM here. So right in this area of 600, we see the offer stepping in. We see some reloading of the bid, and I want to see when the bid steps off for a secondary entry or reoffer. Absorbing into this mix, we got 340 here, and then you'll see the 89 here on the DOM. 251 up around 603. I want to see the off, or I want to see the bid pull off. Now, So first sign of weakness was down into the 601s. Okay. We have 323 bid delta here. We're refreshing up into the 03s, 04s. We have exhaustion on the delta map and dominator in this mix. 360 at this point on delta. We start to see a push. We know the bot came in around 544s, so we'll take a look at that. ES back below pivot. We have this 360 up here in the liquidity zone. Good absorption and good way to spot this, especially against the liquidity zone. Starting to get an attempt of absorption right here in the 588s, but no progress is made as far as moving it away. The sell side is making progress. We still have the absorption attempt from the long side at pivot. It's stuck just above us, and ES is below pivot. It's sandwiched between the weekly open, G line, and the pivot. I don't see any outlier sell delta on this. And also, outside of the pull stack and so forth, we want to see this traverse this zone on the volume profile down to like the 68s, weekly open on NQ. So no sense in putting weight on what's going back and forth with two-way trade until we see that traversal. 24-hour VWAP coming in around the 80s. And so let's watch this here. Slice. Small attempt in order to take that out. Still moving against the sell delta top of range, or the buy delta top of range. We have 224 and the 185 here. Therefore, we want to see continual progress and not see this trap below. $86 to $88. Exactly where we're stepping in on the pull stack. Now stepping down the ladder and pushing. Now, previous day high, G line. This happens very quickly. I'll slow it down. Right here, previous day high. We see that attempt against MGI. We don't see any outlier absorption. We still see 360 above us. We see reasonable two-way trade with sell activity pushing down the book. Nobody offside at this point. Weekly open is right here around 67, and NQ is dropping while ES is below pivot. Speed up a little bit. So push. An attempt to hold a weekly open is evident on ES and NQ. We don't have anything outlier as far as the leg to leg delta profile. And we also see the pull stack stepping down the ladder, stepping down until we get into this zone here, liquidity zone. And the buyers clearly flip the book to some degree right here. And now we're across this distribution and we're below the 68s. So we want to see that maintain below the weekly open. Same with ES. It's about where the bot fired, seeing those orders coming in. So as we come back and test into that, you'll see the bid step back onto the table and lead us back into balance. So if we're looking for the bid, we want to first gauge the offer. We have a pinch setting up, and the offer is starting to step off a little bit, and the bid is firming up right here against the 42s, 42 to 44 zone. And that's, you see our next line at previous week's value high,